Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today. And we're in the temporary studio. We'll be back in the home studio tomorrow after a series of travels and presentations. Glad to see people increasing in numbers in terms of tuning into the show, Stockwell Day-to-Day News. And we're giving you, as you know, some of the behind the scenes that you're not going to get from mainstream media in some of the main stories of the day. Of course, the biggest story around the world today and yesterday was the hostage release from those hostages who were taken hostage almost 2 years ago when Hamas attacked Israel, the worst attack on Israel in terms of deaths and tortures since the Holocaust, and an incredible day as people from Israel, especially a time of rejoicing and celebration despite the sadness that goes with it. So as you know, I try and take a look at what different media present and what might be behind the scenes and what might be different. And one of the things that's very different, especially if you look at what we might call mainstream media, and certainly if you look in the US and Canada, one of the things Canadian media is very reluctant to report, or they do report but downplay it, is outside of Canada, the number of people, especially in Israel, that are giving full credit to President Donald Trump for having been central in this amazing deal that's happened in Gaza and also the hostage release. And as I looked and scanned various media, when it came to Canadian media and much of the leftist media in the US, on the crowd shots of the people who were rejoicing at such a time of celebration, many MAGA hats in the crowd, the Make America Great Again Trump hats, many signs being held up giving Trump the credit. So, and historically, that's going to be proven out to be true. So again, the question is, how is it that people, because of how much they hate a person, still can't report if that person even occasionally does something that's positive? It's called, as you know, Trump derangement syndrome, and causes people not to be able to think clearly on what's happening. But back to the main story, it has happened. These hostages released after, as with all the hostages, in this case up to 2 years of torture. And people are asking, there is reports of ongoing gunfire and violence still going on in Gaza. And as people are looking at that and reporting, it is Hamas, the remaining Hamas, who have not yet put down their firearms. They're actually killing Palestinians that they felt were not faithful to the Hamas cause. So we hope it's not going to result in a civil war in Gaza, as great hope now comes for rebuilding. You've got European nations, you've got Arab nations all supporting Trump and what he has done here through the Abraham Accords and through this Gaza settlement. And now you've got the remaining Hamas killing their own citizens, hoping civil war doesn't break out there. Let's hope the ongoing positive momentum continues. Right at the same time that this is being reported, there is the whole discussion around the Nobel Prize and the fact it didn't go to Trump or to the Arab nations, the Muslim nations that supported him. I'm not part of a conspiracy theory there. There's, I think, a pretty clear reason for that, and that is the Nobel Prize Committee. They take in the applications for who's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize every year by January 31 of each year, and clearly the Gaza deal had not happened by January 31. The woman who was awarded it is increasingly becoming better known, and she's a true hero in the country of Venezuela. And it's Maria Corina Machado. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But as an opposition leader who has to go into hiding, an opposition leader whose party last year won a significant majority of the vote, but the socialist ruler of Venezuela did not allow that to happen and is maintaining control in Venezuela despite actually having lost the election. So her heroism is being reported, and the fact that she's had to go into hiding has been reported. You know what's not reported by much of mainstream media, and certainly media in Canada, is the number of times she completely denounces socialism. And she says socialism just results in poverty being spread equally and results in people's hopes being crushed. And socialism results in economies being crushed. She points to that very clearly. And yet much of mainstream media, which of course leans left philosophically with their culturally Marxist point of view, doesn't like to report that, but people should be listening to everything that Maria Corina Machado is saying, including her strong denunciations of socialism, having reported that as been the single greatest factor for the actual ruinization of the country of Venezuela. When we look at some stats that also recently came out today in the US and in Canada, and it's showing that the number of people who are retiring, of course, is increasing, but in countries like Canada and to a degree in the US, when the birth rate is falling or at least not increasing, the basic corollary to that is there's going to be less people being born and growing up, making money, and being able to be taxed to put money into the retirement programs. So we now see a number of the programs in Canada and around the world where countries whose governments take a policy of high taxation and take a policy of moving away from freedom of enterprise or taxing business more heavily, that is actually resulting in less taxes going to be available in the long run to support people as they retire. So again, maybe we can look to the opposition leader there from Venezuela in terms of her observations and start to seriously question, is it a healthy thing for a country to see its birth rates failing? Those who fear that the world is somehow going to come to an end because we've got too many people on it, there's really no evidence to support that. And certainly evidence to support that retirements could be in jeopardy if we don't change our course, either from socialistic fiscal policy or from the fact of falling birth rates. And in Canada, excuse me, the Prime Minister is being accused by the Parliamentary Budget Officer of starting to play tricks in how certain economic terms are being defined. And with Canada's deficit continuing to rise at very alarming rates, and Canada now this year being pointed to, for this year and last year, being the worst economic performer among what are called wealthy industrialized countries, and again, something in common, as provincially and with some exceptions and nationally, we see the approach of what I'll call Keynesian philosophy, increasing debt, increasing deficit, and somehow pretending it's all going to take care of itself. It's not materializing. Canada's economic output continuing to go down, and it can't be blamed on the trade war with the U.S. And now the parliamentary budget officer is pointing out that what the federal Liberals are doing under Prime Minister Mark Carney is changing the terms. Things that used to be clarified or classified as debt, they're saying, well, you know what, if it's operating money, maybe we shouldn't call it debt, we just call it spending. So very alarming, not only when a government pursues economic policies that increase the debt, but then when they start changing the definitions of debt itself so that it won't show up and they can just keep on spending the money and not worrying about people eventually losing their ability, in fact, even to retire. So keep an eye on that to see if the federal government in Canada will go back to basic common sense accounting. Very disturbing as we see accounts of individual accounts of violence that take place in various countries. The emphasis is usually on the U.S., but the beautiful city of Vancouver that I know something about, which has become increasingly in parts of that city looking like the socially war-torn areas of San Francisco, where people flood the streets, sleep on the streets, camp on the streets, drug dealing, and all kinds of predatory behavior happening. That is increasing in Vancouver because of the socialist government there, the NDP government, and their policies about free drugs and making it easy for people to be shooting up in their free injection sites and generally making lethal drugs more available. And so we're seeing the inevitable violence happening, and that's been characterized just over the last couple of days with stabbings along the beautiful seawall in Vancouver. 7 people stabbed. They've posted the picture of the person doing the stabbing. They hope to obviously apprehend that person. But a curious thing when it comes again, especially in Canada, mainstream media, and so here in the light of this horrific incident, 7 people being stabbed, and CBC seems to want to rush out and say, but you know what, it's all non-life-threatening injuries, non-life-threatening injuries. Why does national media in the U.S. tend to want to downplay this type of violence on the streets of Canada? And by the way, in the aftermath of people being rushed to the hospital in ambulances, 7 people stabbed, and the CBC was rushing out saying non-life-threatening injuries. How would they know that? And in a day when, you can step on a nail and get an infection that kills you, how can they say something's going to be non-life threatening? Why does national media and the culturally Marxist mainstream media in Canada continue to want to downplay this type of violence? It's happening, folks. It needs to be addressed and shouldn't be downplayed. Go along with this, and for those of you not from Canada, you may know that today in Canada, this is Thanksgiving Day, which originally started out as declared by the federal government. This, of course, is generations ago, as being a day of Thanksgiving and a giving of thanks to God for a wonderful country and for all the things we normally give thanks to. Canada, it plays that down and the religious side down so much that a poll that's just out over the last 2 days shows the perception that the population in general has about religion. And in the U.S., it's very clear the majority of the population generally see the advancement of religion as having a positive effect on a nation. In Canada, however, in the poll, less than 35% of Canadians say that they think promotion of religion has a positive effect on society. So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that the Liberals still, in Canada, seem to be going ahead, they haven't denied this, with a piece of legislation which is going to take away charitable status from nonprofits which declare, guess what, as part of their goal, the promotion of religion. So again, federal Liberals in Canada, with the wholehearted support of left-leaning media, seem to be intent on moving away from allowing that tax benefit to nonprofits. If they promote religion, let's see where that goes. Let's see if in Canada, where churches like to remain silent on this issue. It's going to be hard to say. We usually like to close out the show with a comment on culture, and many fans of Diane Keaton are mourning today with her passing. She's definitely a hugely popular figure over many decades of her acting career, a definite talent, regardless of whatever her political views might be. And 2 things I just want to make an observation on. Diane Keaton joins this growing number of people, because it's celebrity, so it gets reported, who are dying almost suddenly, and I'm not saying in a day or 2, but over a period of a few weeks from, it's often some are calling it like a turbo cancer, but some kind of a condition. And I'm not saying this applies to her, but there's this growing number among athletes, among celebrities, among well-known people, and among, I think, the broader population of unexplained, fairly rapid descent health-wise, and catching people by surprise. So let's hope that this gets figured out, what might be causing this. And to risk the broadcast entity being entirely on the downside of things, she was asked once, Diane Keaton was asked, what's her favorite movie? And she said her favorite movie was Something's Gotta Give. I don't know how many of you watched that. It's a bit of a rom-com, so I'd have to check with my wife on that. But the basic plot, as you know, in that movie is, here you had the rich bachelor, played by Jack Nicholson, and then Diane Keaton is a fairly wealthy person kind of living on her own, showing that the trend today, as we know, is more and more people retreating into just their own relationships with themselves, less and less in terms of long-term relationships. And the whole reflection of Something's Gotta Give is that life gets better when a man and a woman are in a relationship together over the long term. And maybe that's something for us to think about as we give a nod to the incredible talent of Diane Keaton. Have a good day. We'll catch you back in the regular studio tomorrow. Thanks.